The Means to an End by its_Kingston on AO3. Episode 4, Chapter 2. The night was quiet, airy in the way that signified something amiss. The creatures of the forest were silent, as though they had been shooed or stolen away. The owls that typically lured Uraraka to sleep seemed to have fallen into one themselves. It took Uraraka long to get used to the sudden lack of noise. But only once she did the weather decide against the peace. Rain began pouring down as though someone high in the clouds had taken a sledgehammer to the dam. The clouds opened their angry maws and let out roars of thunder. A crack of lightning followed it, splitting the sky and reflecting across the top of the pond. Uraraka sighed. She'd seen this storm on the horizon for several days. She moved atop the tower floor, steps purposeful as she stopped in front of her nightstand. There were sounds of movement from outside, the wind as it whipped the loose vines on her tower about. Uraraka thought. She went about lighting her candle, using the tinder box as Bakugou had taught her all those years ago. It lit after a few tries, and Uraraka walked towards the shutters, as she had when the rogue last appeared. A mass of navy blue with large white teeth appeared in the candlelight. But Uraraka didn't recoil this time, merely drew a quick, deep breath in surprise. "Must it take a candle lit under the moon to draw you to my tower?" Uraraka asked. She made no move to stop the rogue as she climbed in the window. Her clothes were drenched, her hands scraped. Uraraka noted her lack of gloves. Hadn't she had those before? "No, my appearance is the storm's doing. My shelter has been swept away by the rain and wind," Toga said. She lowered her mask from her face, revealing a grin to rival that of her mask. "If you ask me, though, you've been attempting such a ritual, Princess." "Nonsense. Nothing more than an observation. Must you spill rainwater across my wooden floors, rogue?" "Such a thing seems to happen whenever it rains." "Unfortunately so." Uraraka walked behind Toga, intent on closing the shutters. "I'm capable of such a feat," Toga said. She closed the shutters instead and turned back to Uraraka. They flew open with great force, enough so to make the rogue startle. "Perhaps not?" "You didn't latch them," Uraraka replied. She did so, making sure Toga learned how to do so as well. "I'd asked if you were raised in a barn of mine, but they have shutters just as this house." "Hold your tongue, Princess," Toga said. A light laugh followed it. She kicked off their wet boots by the window. "I'm attempting to keep your tower in the state I arrived in." "Nothing of the sort will happen as long as you find yourself dripping water. Undress." Uraraka walked to her dresser. She opened the door, eyes glazing over the set of clothes. She wondered what would be fitting of the rogue. Toga clicked her tongue. "Shameful." "I thought not of you as a young boy, but I seemed mistaken, rogue. Unless you much rather be left to the elements, I expect no such remarks." "You'd let me stay?" she asked. Uraraka looked over her shoulder, brows furrowed. She turned back just as quickly upon seeing the rogue's face at the window, undoing the buttons down the front of her garment. "Why wouldn't I? The storm rages outside these walls. I wonder if the acts of King Yagi have angered a god." "I'm an enemy of the kingdom. You made your disdain for me as apparent as the path of a crow. Who's to say it's not my presence that angers someone above?" "And who's to say it's not mine?" "You're as much a person as I. Not good company, but something," Uraraka said. "You're here to stay, whether you cause a storm or not." She passed the white cloth shirt back to Toga, allowing with a pair of beige breeches. Uraraka had attained them just as she had everything else, asking Bakugou, or rather pestering him until he gifted her a pair of comfortable pants that men wore across the kingdoms. Was the only sound Toga made for a long while. "I hope you won't mind if these garments vanish with me come dawn." "I suppose I wouldn't, as long as they return another night." "Is that an invitation, Princess?" Toga wore a smile, her arms crossed. Uraraka turned to face her at this point, surprised by the tough front the rogue had put up. Now barren of her armor and loose-fitting clothes, she seemed so small. Fragile, even. Her frame shook with each breath, perhaps still cold from the rain. "You're one of the two people who scaled my tower. Do you require one?" Uraraka grabbed her metal wool cord from the wooden drawer behind her, then stepped forward. When she stood in front of the rogue, she leaned closer and draped it around her shoulders. "You'd do good to return this before you leave. It's my favorite coat." "Understood." Uraraka scowled. She lifted a hand and gingerly pressed the back of it to Toga's face. "Does something ail you, rogue?" Toga raised her own hand, using it to bat at Uraraka's. "I'm well enough." "The red on your face suggests otherwise." Smiling, Toga replied, "Another cause, lest you count desire as an ailment." "Has a past murderer crossed your mind?" Uraraka asked. She, herself, couldn't tell whether it was a jest. "This tower must have driven you mad if you must ask me such a question," Toga said. She slid her arms through the sleeve of Uraraka's coat, before veneering back towards the window. Her mask was folded atop the crumpled pile she discarded her garments in. Toga grabbed her dagger from the pile. She didn't fasten it, merely held it beside her. Uraraka didn't feel as though she needed to be told why. "Do tell." Toga walked forward across the old wooden floors until she was inches away from Uraraka. She lifted a hand, tucked a stray strand of hair behind Uraraka's ear. "I told you before, princess. You're quite beautiful." Uraraka stepped backwards, brows furrowed. "That's close enough, rogue. Such actions are disgraceful to the kingdom." "I serve no kingdom, princess. Fortunate, isn't that?" "It matters not whether you serve the king or the legion. I will wait for my prince as you should wait for your true love." "Are you given books of folklore and stories as a young kid?" Toga asked. "Why do you ask?" "Humor me, please." "Very well, then," Uraraka said. "I was. I still hold many of them dear." "You aware of the stories, then? A princess seeing their prince and experience the instant infatuation that is love at first sight?" Uraraka nodded, and Toga continued. "Well, I believe the men of our kingdom are handsome. That feeling arrived in my chest as I set my eyes upon a woman." Uraraka bit her tongue. "Such things are deceived in the books I was given." "I suppose they're not. I was hard-pressed to find one myself," Toga said. She stared down at Uraraka. What she felt behind her eyes was conveying through the way her chest formed between her eyebrows, the way she scorned a frown. Uraraka hadn't seen her frown, sans the time Toga spoke of her mentor. "You suggest such a thing is common enough to warrant a tale, yet remains unpublished." "Precisely," Toga replied. "For tales that show such are considered undesirable. You know as well as I do, perhaps more. The draw of gold. You speak of an untapped well, yet no one ventures close. It would be undesirable for a dragon to perch on my tower, yet they populate stories with hardly an expectation." Toga's frown left her, the corners of her mouth pulled into a smile. "Perhaps, then, you'd let me help you down." Uraraka found herself laughing. "Rogue, do not lure a dragon to my tower. If I can find one, I cannot promise the temptations would win out," she replied. There was a glint in her eyes, one that had Uraraka staring, trying to place what it was she saw. "The chances of you leaving with me come morning, princess?" "I apologize, but you know the prince will come for my hand in marriage. It is he who will help me." "But why?" Toga asked, sounding almost as offended as she was curious. Uraraka crossed her arms. "What do you mean?" "Must it be him?" "If not him, then who? I see no alternative present in the story we spoke of. You expect the dragon to lead over to rescue me?" Uraraka asked, downing a teasing smile. Toga remained rather serious-looking. "There tends to not be enemies of the kingdom written into—" Please move from the idea, Uraraka said, gaze drifting from the floor. I will not be leaving with you. Why, princess? I only wish. As he said, you are an enemy to the kingdom. Even if you were not, you are no prince either. It is your choice who you wed. Yet my fate is stretched ahead of me as clear as the horizon. Uraraka said, I must wait. No, just as it is a choice of mine, it is yours to. You do require justification to. Yes, princess, yes, I do require justifications of why you will not grant me but a moment to speak my mind. Toga exhaled sharply, letting her thumbs and forefinger dirt over her eyes. That was not my intention, Uraraka evenly said. I only wished to point you towards the light. The light of what? For I see no darkness around me. Poor choice of wordings. Uraraka let her face fall to the floor. I wish not to have this conversation. Let's drive a larger wedge into the center of this temporary alliance. Toga only nodded. The candle flicked between them, sitting on the table. The tower had never been larger, never felt larger especially, but as it filled the silence, Uraraka could attest that it never seemed to come to an end. Wind filled in through the little cracks, soft whistlings hardly heard above the drum of rain. I suppose I'll take the chair, Toga said. Her voice seemed to waver with the candle. Nonsense. I find sleep impossible on nights such as these. Sleep in the bed. As you wish, she said dryly. Toga dropped her cover blade onto the small table side beside the bed. Over her shoulder, she spoke to Uraraka. I suppose this is good night as well as goodbye. I have no reason to wake you come morning if all you want is to rot away in this tower rather than leave. Must you make trouble? Uraraka asked. It brings joy to my oh so tragic tale. I suppose yours isn't all pastries and crown events, though, and for that, I commemorate your resolve to stand with the kingdom. Toga said. My tale isn't tragic. Uraraka lied. My prince will arrive. He will free me, and we will venture back to his kingdom. That isn't what you want, is it? Her voice was cold and calm, as if she were reading from a book. Return to the kingdom as father's success, and prince wife? Rear children? Never leave the walls of your new prison? You know nothing, rogue. Uraraka shouted. She charged forward, stepping in front of Toga. Toga, who wore an unreadable expression, as if she were decided to wait for Uraraka to continue before settling on one. You speak of things you haven't had, a future that do not belong to you. Yet my intentions are far better than any of your so-called advisors. I shouldn't have allowed an enemy of the kingdom in. Not again. I knew you spoke lies when you insisted you were equal. There is a reason the legions work, not madness. Nobles like you have decided to value the people for far longer than necessary. Nary the reason of your own. All work, it is. Not cold-blooded murder. The Legion are no more delegators of faith than the king. It is the people themselves that put worth to their names. Toga scoffed, not recoiling from the challenge. Cold-blooded murderer. It is work. Work that the common people will not accept for fear of sullying their name and of staying their hands. It is work nonetheless and requires all the more. Stealing away the life of Prince Midoriya was simply a job to you? Uraraka yelled. Her life was controlled in a grimace face. Toga looked confused, if not insulted. Your prince has not returned, and you blame me? Toga all but growled. There has been an increase in guardmen recently, a number of unsafe for my style of work. I have been told to stand down while the negotiations of marriage pen through the kingdoms of Yue and Archie. Your prince is marrying another. Not by my doing, princess. What? Uraraka asked. A venom disappeared. Her voice was quiet, low, as if all her anger had been directed to keeping herself from shattering. You blame me without holding an ounce of information. Who is cold-blooded here? Toga asked. Her tone was just as sharp, though whether through pity or exhaustion. She lowered her volume. Uraraka didn't utter another word. Her eyes weren't seen, nor were her ears hearing. She felt gone. just as her chances of escape. "I'll be excusing myself now," Toga said. She snatched her dagger from the bedside table and made her way to the window. Uraraka didn't move. Toga laced up her boots and dotted her mask once more. She unlatched the window. "Wait, rogue!" Uraraka called. "You will get your garments back when I return for my own," she said grimly. "That's not—" Toga was gone before Uraraka could complete her sentence. 3 days and nights had followed by, as unbroken as the river and just as monotone as one too. Uraraka laid in a bed that morning, unable to drag herself from it, as she'd done with such determination for 13 years before that. Her 14th year in the tower approached, yet she hadn't had a soul to celebrate it, save for Bakugou. She'd be strange without his company. He wouldn't arrive for a week. Her only chance of escape was torn from her by that single sentence. If she hadn't let Toga in, and if that bothersome rogue hadn't decided to stir the pot, she wouldn't be in this mess. Yes, it was easy to blame her troubles on the par of them, the prince and the rogue. If he hadn't shown up with the promise of freedom, Toga wouldn't have arrived at her doorstep after him. Uraraka felt as though she needed to scream, to shatter the glass jars that littered her table from days of stress eating, and to crumble the bricks that stouted her tower. She convinced herself that if the Prince Midoriya wasn't to arrive back at the tower, then Uraraka was destined to herself. Yet the vines were too slick and the bricks were too rugged to climb down. She had tried to scale down before, but to no avail. That was the only way, Uraraka figured. She sighed and let her eyes fall shut, content to sleep in a pool of her own rage and fear. Uraraka began to drift off. A sound outside her window snapped her awake, and she sat up. Her joints felt uneasy, stiff, with days of energy sorted, yet not used. Uraraka jumped from her bed and hurried to the window. "Rogue?" she asked. A bird stared back at her at the windowsill. A worm clutched on its beak. "Oh." Uraraka watched it fly off to the trees to consume its meal, but a single thought on her mind. Why had she wanted to see the woman who ruined her life once more? With that same expression as a child forced to apologize to another, Uraraka admitted that saying Toga ruined her life was immature. Her life was still intact, and she was no worse off than she'd originally been. Stay in her mental state. Prince Midoriya had abandoned Uraraka in her tower, not a worry about the marriage ushered to her. Perhaps King Yagi sprung it on him, a part of Uraraka's mind suggested. Toga had, informed her of the pending marriage, taking the clothes Uraraka had simply given but chosen for her, argued with her for over silly matters. Uraraka couldn't blame a thing on her. Begrudgingly, Uraraka accepted that even Toga's presence would be better than nothing at all. She turned from the window, eyes drifting, to the wet clothes she hung on the line of the corner. They were dry now. Yet perhaps her presence would do no harm. Okay, alright. This one is coming out late, I know. AU3 is down right now. I'm surprised I was able to record this. AU3 has been acting up the past couple of days. But that's not the reason why this one is so late. The reason that this one is so late is personal reasons. Hold up, I gotta pull up Twitter. Oh, I have to search up X. What if I just put X in the search bar? Will Twitter pop up? Twitter will pop up, but it still pops up as Twitter. Oh my god. X.com. That literally sounds like some corn website. You cannot tell me I am wrong. Ah, fuck you, Kingston. I keep saying this. I keep speaking in such a term. Fuck! I hate myself. We have posted our latest set of release notes detailing all code updates since November. As well, looking for some server hiccups, please stand by. The archive is back, but things may be slow for a while, okay? Receiving reports of slowness and are looking into it. Yeah, so, shit's been on the rockers. Shit's been on the rockers. On the rockers, my dude. Rockers. If I search up, what if I search up AO3? AO3, search. Latest, and then I go to latest. AO3, haven't heard that name in years. Smoke. Recondemning her. Oh, that's Spanish. Okay. I have read every symphony fic on AO3, and these are my favorites. Okay, anyways. AO3 is back. Mwahaha. I repeat, my life support is back. Now it's time for my bedtime story. Yap all day. That is a mood. Can y'all give good recommendations in AO3? Help a girl here. What do you need? My Hero Academia? Some other stuff? Also, okay, enough of AO3. I'm gonna close Twitter now. Enough of AO3. Oh my god! Midoriya is to wed another? Blasphemy! How can this be? How can he just leave Uraraka to her own suffering? Abandon her? Maybe it is, like, you know, Uraraka thought. The king is bestowing this upon him, leaving him no choice but to wed another, but... God. And who is he to wed, Kingston? Who is he to wed? Is it gonna be like someone we know? Is it gonna be one of those you'll never know, you'll never figure out kind of situations? Who is he to wed? Who is he to wed? Please inform me. Please. Okay, let's see. It doesn't show. In spirit. Hawks in spirit. I love that. Only reference / mentioned. Oh, typical homophobia. Princess, rogue, prince, medieval, mid-ages, pre-era, where it take place. Uraraka, century, fantasy, are practically siblings, lightings, getting together, enemies, celebrities, talk first. Then Uraraka falls so hard she goes through the tower floor. Trigger warning for panic attacks, anxiety attacks in chapter 6. Insecure, Himiko Toga. That's not an official tag? Damn. You're telling me y'all don't think she might think, Chako doesn't really love her? Kyogo acts like a bird because he's only one. Because he is one. Oh god. Spinner / Shigaraki? Ooh, bittersweet ending. What do you mean bittersweet ending? Hold up, Kingston, what do you mean? What do you mean bittersweet ending? What do you mean? Kingston, you can do this. Kingston, what do you mean? Kingston, what do you mean? Kingston! Okay, I don't have much to say other than, I hope we see Uraraka and Toga, smooching in the next chapter. As always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.